The echo of my brother's victory speech was still hanging in the air when his voice cut clean through it. "You're done here. Security will escort you out." I hadn't even lifted my glass yet. The entire hall still, chairs half-turned. Silver light trembling over crystal. 200 faces snapping toward me, like they'd been waiting for this moment. No one moved. Not my parents. Not my cousins. Not even the uncle who used to call me his right hand. I didn't protest. I unclipped the badge they'd labeled support staff, set it beside the untouched champagne, and walked toward the exit as the applause died in a slow, embarrassed hush. They thought the humiliation ended at that door. But something inside me cracked cleanly, quietly, like a fault line finally deciding to shift. And the truth is, that was only the first second of the countdown. Before I continue, tell me where you're listening from. I grew up in a family where volume passed for leadership and appearances counted more than substance. I was neither loud nor interested in putting on a show, which meant I blended into the background even when I was the one keeping everything from falling apart. My name is Evan Hale, eldest son, unofficial problem solver, and the easiest person in the house to overlook. I wasn't brilliant in the way that dazzled people, but I was steady, good with numbers, good with patterns, good with seeing consequences before they hit. My father called it overthinking. I called it survival. Dad, Richard Hale, was the kind of man who mistook confidence for competence. He adored decisive gestures, even if they were wrong. My mother, Lydia, floated around problems like they were weather she couldn't control. My younger siblings, Marcus and Elena, learned early that charm beat effort every time. Marcus, 1 year younger than me, grew up convinced the world owed him shortcuts. Elena, the youngest, didn't need shortcuts. She already had everyone wrapped around her finger. I never resented them for it. Not then. I just thought I had a different role to fix her. When I was 16, Dad started a logistics company out of a borrowed warehouse. Drafty walls, squeaking metal racks, fluorescent lights that buzzed like they were tired of being alive. I was the only one who showed up every day without being asked. I organized inventory, updated spreadsheets, patched the mistakes Marcus made when he wandered in hungover, and covered for Elena when she forgot client appointments. No one thanked me. They didn't even notice. The only person who really saw me was my grandfather, Henry Hale, a retired accountant with a spine like a steel beam and a gentleness he tried to hide. He used to pat the seat beside him and say, "People can overlook you, Evan, but numbers never will. They remember." I didn't understand what he meant then, but he kept every receipt, every document, every odd clause he thought might matter someday. And he taught me to do the same. The signs of manipulation came early: decisions made without me, credit handed to my siblings, my work reframed as family help instead of contribution. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself it was normal. But the truth was simpler. I was useful. So they used me, and they assumed I'd never notice. As the company expanded, the pressure inside our family grew in ways no one wanted to name. Responsibilities multiplied, and strangely, almost all of them slid in my direction, not through praise, through expectation, through the quiet certainty that I would pick up whatever was dropped without complaint. Marcus got a new title every 6 months: head of outreach, business development lead, client experience director, none of which he understood, and all of which he celebrated loudly. Elena became the company's face, handling interviews, photo shoots, and charity events, anything with a camera pointed at it. And me, I became the invisible operating system, the guy who stayed late to merge invoices, rewrite proposals, fix shipping errors, and recalculate budgets before Dad signed something disastrous. Dad never asked if I could handle it. He simply assumed I would. "You're good with the details," he'd say, waving me over while his TV blared in the background. Just tidy this up for me. Tidy up usually meant salvaging something Marcus had botched or a promise Elena had made without checking feasibility. Through college, through my 20s, through the years when I should have been figuring out who I was, the company consumed everything. I paid for equipment out of my own savings because it's a family investment. I skipped vacations because Evan knows the systems better than anyone. The financial pressure escalated subtly. New loans appeared with my name listed as guarantor. Insurance policies quietly updated. Licenses renewed under accounts I didn't remember creating but recognized my own passwords in. The real shift came the year my parents decided to expand our distribution facility. They pushed through a loan so oversized it made my stomach drop. When I questioned it, Dad brushed me off. Banks like you? Your track record helps us all. Your track record? Us paying for it. Then one afternoon, I found Marcus approving a supplier contract that locked us into a 36-month commitment at absurd rates. Dad said you'd review it, he said, shrugging. I never saw this. I replied, well, you always fix things after the fact, right? It wasn't a joke. It wasn't even malicious. It was their belief system laid bare. I existed to absorb mistakes, to keep the machine running while they coasted on narratives they built about themselves. A line was crossed when Dad forwarded me a confidential payroll spreadsheet, one that showed I earned less than Marcus's assistant. For your records, he wrote casually, like it meant nothing, like I meant nothing. I didn't confront them. Not yet. But for the first time, I stopped explaining the feeling away. The strings weren't tightening accidentally. They were pulling me into a position I was never meant to escape. The breaking point didn't arrive with shouting. It arrived dressed as celebration. My family was good at that wrapping cruelty in ribbon and calling it tradition. It happened on the night of the company's 20th anniversary gala. The hall glowed with gold uplighting. String quartet drifting through the air. Servers weaving between tables with polished trays. My siblings looked immaculate, Marcus in a tailored suit he hadn't paid for. Elena shimmering under spotlights she treated like old friends. My name wasn't on the program. I noticed that first. Then the seating chart. Marcus at the front table. Elena beside my parents. Me, at a side table, crowded with unfamiliar sponsors and spouses. Listed under operations support. A title I'd never held. A title nobody bothered to correct. I tried to swallow it the way I had swallowed everything else. But then Elena took the stage. She raised her glass, smiling into the lights. And tonight, she announced, we honor the people who built this company. Marcus, Dad, and me. A spotlight swung over the crowd, landing neatly on them. People applauded. Camera flashes sparked. I waited for my name, or a nod, or even a glance. None came. Instead, she gestured toward a slide projected behind her, a timeline of key contributors. My work, my systems, my projects, my fixes appeared under other people's names. Marcus, Elena, even interns. And then the moment that snapped whatever was left of my composure. A photo of a warehouse overhaul I had let alone weeks of planning. Months of execution, labeled spearheaded by Marcus Hale. I felt something inside me go still. Not hot. Not loud. Just still. A clean crack. The kind that doesn't hurt at first because the nerves haven't caught up. When the applause faded, Dad leaned toward the mic and said, and as we move into the next chapter, we're proud to say Marcus will be stepping into a larger leadership role. The crowd cheered. I wasn't mentioned. Not once. That was when the truth stopped whispering and finally spoke. This isn't ignorance. It's intention. They weren't forgetting me. They were erasing me. So I set down my glass. They stood up and walked out, not defeated but decided. If they wanted a world without me in it, I would show them exactly what that looked like. The strange thing about finally breaking is how calm everything becomes afterward. Clarity has a temperature cool, almost metallic, and it settled over me the moment I stepped outside the gala hall. I drove home without the radio, without thinking, letting the quiet decide my next moves. When I walked into my office, the lamp on my desk cast a small circle of light over the folders I kept locked away, the ones no one ever bothered to ask about. That was their first mistake. Every contract, every equipment purchase, every expansion plan, every software license, all of it had required a guarantor. And because I'd been the only reliable signature in a house full of impulse and ego, every one of those documents bore my name, not theirs. I opened the drawer. The weight of a decade sat inside, organized, cross-referenced, airtight. Not revenge. Records. The first thing I did was revoke automatic payments tied to my accounts. 15. Then 20. Then 30 cancellations, each completed with professional, icy precision. Next came the emails. I drafted them like I was writing instructions for a machine, effective immediately. Funding previously supplied under my authorization will be suspended. This is to confirm the termination of my guarantee regarding. As majority guarantor on file, I am withdrawing my support for no anger, no commentary, just structure. I copied the board on every single one. Then I sent a final message to the family email, thread a space usually flooded with unearned victories and complaints about tasks they never completed. My email was 3 sentences: I am withdrawing all personal and financial support from company operations. Please refer to attached notices for details. This is not open for discussion. I didn't wait for replies. A soft knock echoed from the hallway. My grandfather, Henry, stepped inside, leaning slightly on his cane. His eyes didn't hold surprise, only the quiet understanding of someone who had seen this path unfolding long before I did. It was time, he said simply. Not a question, a benediction. For the first time in my life, I felt the axis shift, not in the company, but in me. I was no longer the fixer, the safety net, the invisible backbone. I was the owner of my choices, and theirs were finally catching up. The board chose the location, not me. A private conference wing at the Grand Meridian Hotel. All glass walls and polished stone floors. The kind of place where important people pretended they weren't afraid of consequences. I arrived early. Not to prepare, everything had been prepared years ago, but to watch the room settle before the storm. One by one, the board members filtered in. Mr. Whitman nodded to me. Crisp and respectful. Ms. Cole set her leather folder down and offered a quiet, "Morning, Evan." Mr. Rivera gave me a look that said he'd suspected this reckoning was overdue. Then the elevator chimed. My family stepped out. All 4 of them, clustered together like a unit that had forgotten how cracks form from the inside. Dad looked irritated. Mom looked confused. Marcus looked hungover. And Elena looked furious. They hadn't expected a formal meeting. They certainly hadn't expected an audience. Why the hell are we here? Marcus demanded. Mr. Whitman didn't flinch. This is an emergency review of company governance, he said. You'll want to sit. They didn't. So I began. I placed my laptop on the table, the screen brightening as the voting portal opened across both the monitor and the large wall display. Rows of bylaws lined up like clean blades. Section 14, C pulsed softly at the top. Elena, I said evenly. Your announcement at the gala triggered an automatic review of executive appointments. As majority guarantor and controlling signatory, I initiated the clause last night. Mom pressed a hand to her chest. Evan, what does this mean? It means, Miss Cole replied before I could, that every decision made without his consent is now subject to reversal. The room shifted. Air tightened. Someone's pen clicked twice. Too fast. Dad tried the old tone, the one that used to shrink me. Son, we don't need to make this messy. It's already messy. I said, still calm. You just never looked at the paperwork. Mr. Grant, the attorney, entered, then a tall man with a voice like a sealed envelope. He set a thick binder on the table. These are the documents, Mr. Hale has maintained, he said. They verify every financial tie, every guarantee, every clause the family signed without reading. Elena's face drained. Marcus swore under his breath. Mom whispered, "Oh my God." Dad flipped through the binder like he was hoping a different truth would appear on the next page. How could you do this to your own family? Elena snapped. I met her eyes. You did it to yourselves. I just stopped cleaning up after you. The vote opened. Green for retaining their positions. Red for removal. The first result flashed red. Then another. Then 5 more. The percentage climbed 62%. 68%. 73%. Elena lunged toward my chair. You can't just take everything, Mr. Whitman stepped between us. No one is taking anything, he said firmly. We are restoring lawful control. Final tally, 76% red. Their titles dissolved with a single digital sweep. Silence spread heavy. Complete. Undeniable. Dad's voice cracked first. So, what now? I closed the laptop. The click sharp in the stillness. Now, I said, we set boundaries. And you learn what life looks like without leaning on me. Then I stood, nodded to the board, and walked out of the room, not triumphant, not vindictive, just free. In the months that followed, the world didn't end for my family, but it did shrink. Marcus tried to charm his way into another executive role, only to discover charm didn't impress anyone without a safety net behind it. The non-compete held firm. The silence afterward held even firmer. Elena attempted to keep her public persona afloat. But influence doesn't convert into leadership when people finally see the numbers behind the curtain. Her speaking invitations thinned. Her confidence did too. Dad faded quietly into the background, the weight of his own signatures settling across his shoulders. Mom retreated into avoidance, as she always had. They moved to a smaller home in a quieter town, away from the questions they couldn't answer. None of them were destroyed. They simply had to live inside the truth they'd spent decades ignoring. Meanwhile, our company began to breathe differently. Steadier, cleaner, honest. My office became a place I could sit without bracing for someone else's crisis. Meetings turned intentional. Decisions followed logic instead of adrenaline. Departments learned to solve their own problems instead of funneling everything to me. And my grandfather Henry remained the constant. He'd sit across from my desk with a cup of tea, watching the sun move across the window. You look lighter, he'd say. And he was right. I felt lighter in ways I hadn't realized were possible. Healing wasn't loud. It was subtle. Small choices stacking into a life that finally belonged to me. Morning walks before work. Weekends without emergency calls. Evenings spent in silence that didn't sting anymore. Freedom didn't feel like revenge. It felt like space. Like breath. Like finally standing in a room not built to minimize me. My family reached out. Occasionally. Texts. Voicemails. Long explanations rewritten to soften history. I read none of them. Forgiveness doesn't always require conversation. Sometimes it's simply choosing not to reopen a door you've already walked through. I didn't win. There was no victory lap. Just alignment. And peace. And finally, a life not held together by duty or denial, but by choice. If stories like this stay with you, if you've ever been the quiet one, the overlooked one, the one holding everything together while others took the credit, stay close. There are more truths to tell.